I think what we're seeing here is really a challenge, not only in the JCPOA, but really a challenge to the international norms, on freedom of navigation and freedom of the seas. And so we, would say to the international community that we should not yield to nuclear extortion by the Iranian regime.
Rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran as the Pentagon prepares to send 1,000 additional troops to the Middle East following a series of attacks on tankers near the Persian Gulf, while Iran ramps up its uranium enrichment program. Congressman Michael Waltz sits on the Armed Services Committee and joins us now. Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Tensions are certainly escalating here. What happens next?
Well, I think one of the things that is important that needs to come out in the reporting is that these troops are being requested by the commander in the field, by the Central Command commander, in response to, look, what the Iranians are doing is lashing out. The sanctions are working. Inflation is spiking in Iran. You have a series of labor strikes, and importantly, their oil exports, since the president lifted the waivers in terms of Iran being able to export its oil exports have dropped from 2.5 million barrels per day to less than 400,000. So Iran historically has lashed out. It externalizes the problem and distracts its own populace, and it creates an external crisis. I think the administration is acting absolutely appropriately, defensively, in protecting our allies and assets in the region.
What do you make of the Iranian President Rouhani putting pressure on Europe about a new deal and actually putting a deadline on it, July 7th, that something has to be done, an agreement has to be made, and a deal has to come together? What about that pressure?
Well, I think Morgan Ortagus at State described it correctly as nuclear blackmail, in the sense of what the Iranians are trying to do is create leverage. They're trying to galvanize the Europeans, and they're trying to create this narrative, if but for the United States, and you're hearing this with the Democrats in Congress as well, had not withdrawn from the JCPOA, the Iran deal, then none of this would be happening. And that ignores the facts that Iran is supporting terrorism all over the region, in Syria and Iraq and in Yemen. It's developing a missile program in violation of UN sanctions, and importantly, it's holding Americans hostage as we speak, chained to the floor of its prison, if it's Evin prison, and that has to stop. So this notion that Iran was behaving responsibly before the president withdrew from the Iran deal is just patently false.
I want to get your reaction to a member of Congress taking on the president over the escalating tensions with Iran and Iran's behavior. She's blaming the president. Ilhan Omar putting this tweet out: none of this would be happening if Trump didn't back out of the Iran nuclear deal. America's response should be to return to the table and reinstate the Iran nuclear deal. Increasing tensions and threats of war serve nobody's interest. She's been an open critic of the president, so it comes as no surprise, but in a very public way, blaming the White House for what is happening.
Well, that just ignores the facts and ignores history, from the hostages to the Beirut bombing in the 1980s to killing over 500 American soldiers during the Iraq War. At the end of the day, Iran is emboldened by perceived weakness, and it is deterred by strength. And right now, the administration is showing strength, and I applaud them for not waiting until we have additional American body bags to then respond. That's why we sent a carrier, and that's why we sent assets in the region. And Iran should get the message loud and clear to back down. Now, what did the President Reagan do in the 1980s? He began escorting ships through the Straits of Hormuz, and he began taking action and actually striking some of Iran's boats. And I would support those actions moving forward today as a deterrent and as a defensive measure.